welcome back to another episode. And we are joined today by a familiar face from the tutoring realm, which is the wonderful Arthur. But just in case you don't know him, Arthur, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me back, Susie. It's a pleasure to be here as always. So hello, everyone. My name is Arthur Moore. I have been a full-time tutor since 2021. Before then, I was a qualified secondary maths teacher. So that's my background. I've taught in schools across the UK as well as international. I've taught in a full range of schools, state, independent, boarding, all through big schools, small schools. It's got a real range of experiences there. As I said, since 2021, I've been a full-time online maths tutor, and I work with students one-to-one and in groups in an online setting. In 2024, I won the National Tutor of the Year by the Tutors Association. I also do a number of other stuff in the tutoring space. I run webinars and workshops. I post videos. I run WhatsApp groups. I also run a CPD provider via Navigated Tutor, and via that I help support tutors with their pedagogical knowledge so they can increase the impact they are having with their students. And as you know, Susie, I basically like to talk about education and tutoring and maths, so this is perfect.
It's everything that you want.
Yes, it's all I need.
So to begin with, Arthur, from your experience, how does anxiety actually show up in a student when you're asking questions in a session? You know, what does it look like for anyone who's maybe not encountered it as of yet?
So there's normally two ways it shows up, and they're actually very, very different. So it's important to be aware of both. So the classic one is kind of the shutdown, I'm not going to say anything approach. So we ask a question and we just get that awkward, it's a bit awkward, get that awkward silence, or we get, I can't do it, or I don't know. We get a very kind of a shutdown. So that's one way anxiety shows up. It's just a student kind of shutting down and not engaging with us. Now, the other way we often see anxiety is the complete opposite, where a student engages too quickly and isn't taking time to actually think about a question. So you ask a question and the student immediately jumps in with an answer, and whether that answer is right or whether it's wrong, and it might not even be related to your question. They might be asking a complete different question, and the reason for that is the anxiety that is caused by the stress rising in the student. They have sensed that the way to get out of that is by giving an answer. So I'll get out of this awkward by giving you what you want. And we've all experienced that as educators, where you ask a question and the student just 7, or I don't know, Hamlet.
Yeah.
So it's not even related to what we've actually asked a question about. And that's because the student's anxiety has kicked in. They haven't actually listened to our whole question. They've just heard maybe a word. They've said, I want to get out of this awkward situation. I'm just going to say something, hope it's right, and we move on. So two very different ways, but both are showing that the student isn't comfortable in that question environment.
No, it's really interesting to hear that. And it's good to know, like how you said, that there's the two different ways that they can respond, because you might have that eagerness from that student. You think, oh, maybe they're just really enthusiastic, but actually, like you say, there's a bit more going on. So following on from that, what kinds of questions would you say works best for those anxious students? Is it open, closed, multiple choice, or just kind of like, the classic verbal, walk me through your ideas and your reasoning? What would you say?
So I think this is a really good question, because often we try and find that magic solution. Oh, like a student's asked a question. I want that student to feel comfortable. So I'm just going to only ask open questions or closed questions. And the problem is all these different types of questions, they come with their own quote unquote issues. So like an open question is quite intimidating, isn't it? Because I'm not even giving you any guidance. That can feel quite intimidating. But also a closed question can feel very intimidating, because the way it's asked is like a yes or no. Like it's very obvious whether a question, I'm going to get it right or wrong. So both are intimidating, but in very different ways. So what you really need to think about is actually mixing up your question strategies. But what we should be focusing on is making them low stakes rather than high stakes questions. So a high stakes question is when there's something riding on it, essentially. Whereas the low stakes question is we're taking away that kind of like, I'm going to give you a mark, I'm going to tick a box, you're going to get a green highlighter, whatever. And it's actually by making the question low stakes is what takes away that anxiety. So it's not so much about the question you are asking, it's about the way you are asking it. So in a way I would think about this is instead of asking an open or a closed question, think about it as an agree or disagree question. So make a statement and ask your student to agree or disagree with that. Because then there's not actually a definitive, like you are right or wrong. I'm asking your opinion, whether you agree or disagree. And then you'll actually learn loads about their thinking process from whether they disagree or disagree. So if you're teaching history, you could ask something about around the Battle of Hastings. Do you think this was an important part of the Battle of Hastings? Do you agree or disagree with that? That gives your student a way to engage with the question, but it's not, they're going to say, oh, I disagree. And I go, you are wrong. You cannot possibly agree with this statement. So it's not so much about the type of question you are asking, it's how you are using them and think about the outcome you're trying to get from them. One of the examples I would use from this is a multiple choice question, which is one of the ones you know, like I love multiple choice questions. They are fantastic. But if we don't use them effectively, we're actually getting away the whole point of a multiple choice question. So a classic one, us as educators, and I have done this, I'm only talking about things I've ever done, is we go, right, I'm going to ask some multiple choice questions, but I don't want it to be too intimidating or too scary. So I'm going to make one of the answers a funny one. I'm going to, like that. I'm going to make one of the answers obviously wrong. Like, obviously the answer's wrong. I'm going to make it quite obvious that the answer's A. Okay. And I go, well, that's great. The students engaged for it. They've asked question A. But now I need to ask myself, like, well, what was the point of asking that multiple choice question? Because I've used a multiple choice question, but I haven't actually used all the benefits of a multiple choice question where I've got slightly different answers to learn anything about the student. So have I used it just so they get a right answer? Now, if that was my intention, that's fine, but I need to be aware of that intention. But something like a multiple choice question, sometimes the anxiety from a multiple choice question is not the answer. It's the fact that you're saying, here's a question, right, straight away, here are 4 answers, you must select the right one. It feels very kind of, who wants to be a millionaire? There might be a timer goes off in their head. I've only got 10 seconds to answer this. Whereas actually, we can slightly change a multiple choice question, make it really effective. We ask the question, then we pause. We give the student time to think. That takes away the anxiety a little bit. We then put up the 4 answers and they can select which one hopefully aligns with the answer they were thinking about. So we're still using a multiple choice question. We're using the benefits from a multiple choice question. But what we're not doing is using a multiple choice question to actually create a stressful environment. So it's very much about how you use your question strategies, rather than which specific one you use at a moment in time. Mix it up and see which one works for that student.
I really like that. I love the whole agree and disagree as well. I think that's really fun. And I think, that's applicable for all age ranges. I'm thinking, especially, if you're having a younger students, like you say, they're nervous, they're anxious. You could even have it like printed off as little cards. Do you agree or do you disagree? And they could explore it. But yeah, it's great because it would work with the littlies, but it would be perfect for your nervous kind of 16-year-olds too.
Yeah. Sometimes we think about agree or disagree can only be in, like, I gave a history example. It has to be something where there's a bit of nuance. I can do it in maths. Even with a primary level multiplication question, I could do the first step of my multiplication and go, do you think this is the best method I could use for this question?
Oh, yeah.
That's really engaging. The student might go, well, actually, I've been using the column method at school, so I feel more comfortable with that. Or I've been using the grid method. And you actually learn loads about your student. But again, it's a low stakes question. Do you think I've done this question well? What could I have done better about this question? Do you agree with my first step? So there's loads of ways you can use that in subjects that aren't kind of where there is natural nuance. You can bring your subject.
Oh, I love that. That's a great tip.
And I can see with the primary agree to screen a little card.
I'm already thinking like laminating will start. That's what to do now. But that again leads into about the phrasing of questions, I suppose, doesn't it? So what would you say? How can tutors phrase questions to encourage that participation? I know you kind of touched on that in this question, but is there anything else that you'd want to kind of add on, to what you've already said?
So I have a go-to tip for this one. This is my go-to for students who are kind of anxious or quote unquote shy. What I would do, and this works whether you're working one-to-one, in a group, face-to-face, online, this really works, is instead of asking the student to give the answer to the question, you provide the answer. The answer has been given. So whether if that's one-to-one, I might answer my own question. If it's in a group, I'll get it from another student. And then I ask the student who is shy or anxious, I'd say, what was good about that answer? What was good about the answer? Now, what's really useful about that phrase is I'm taking away the stress of the student to give a correct or incorrect answer. I have already told the student that we have identified the correct answer. What was good about that answer implies that this was a good answer. And I'm merely asking the student to go, well, what I think was good about this answer, and keep bringing the positivity to it. But what it's actually underneath the surface doing is I'm testing that student's knowledge of the process, of the method, or the answer I've given to see where they agree. So if they just say, oh, I think it was good because it was the right answer, that tells me a lot about the student I'm working with. But if they say, oh, that was good because that specific process works really well for questions to do with circles, then that's great. But saying what was good about the answer takes all the way the stress of like, oh, can I get the right answer or not? And just says, right, we've already got the right answer. Let's build upon it. So I really like that phrase. I use it all the time with students who are shy, anxious, quote unquote. And like, I think it's a really nice way to get the engagement. And then over time, you can adapt that question as they feel more confident with you in your sessions. You can say, instead of what was good about that answer, it's like, how could I do that answer better next time? It's still not saying that was wrong. It's just saying, how could I do it better? It's a slight imagine. Then over time, it's like, well, actually, what would you say to another student who got this question wrong? What would you say? Then you can start giving wrong answers. You can say, well, what could be improved about my answer? Where did I go wrong? And it's all building from that step of like, we come from a place of positivity, not a place of judgment.
Oh, that's really nice. And like you say, it just shows the power of your language, and that phraseology can really change the whole thing.
Absolutely not. And then my other tip to be with that in terms of the phrasing is just to be some of it from a place of positivity. So especially with that student who is anxious, if they give you anything, find the positivity in it and give them that positivity. And then that is showing to them that if you engage in these questions, we are going to find the positives. And then over time, we can be kind of a bit more kind of find out where to improve. But we can't get better engagement if the student is not engaging.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like building it all up, isn't it? And then, like you say, they'll come to that point where they feel really comfortable. Like you say, if you do go, oh, well, like give us a little bit more because they already feel like confident. Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point, that Arthur. So alongside that, then, would you say that there's any strategies around things like timing and pacing and the actual setting itself to help those sorts of learners so that they can feel a bit more comfortable in those sessions?
So there's two main things I would do here. I would, before you've even asked a question, I would consider the environment you're working. So if you're working with a student who is anxious, they are often thinking and being anxious about things that you're not actually talking about. They're already worried about the question you're going to ask. They're anxious about giving the wrong answer. And what happens then is they're considering that so much that they actually miss your question. They're already thinking about how can I get this question right, or how can I not get it wrong, but they actually don't hear your question. And then what that means is they get it wrong because they haven't listened to the question. So what you can do is you can frame your question. And what I mean by that is doing something before you ask the question. So for example, if I'm working with a primary student, we're doing some creative writing, and I'm about to put a picture on the screen, and I want them to explain what's something creative about the answer, or I want them to do some creative writing, or I want them to think about what the illustrator was thinking about time. Before I put the question up, I would go, right, Susie, in a moment, I'm going to put a picture up. When that picture goes up, I'm going to ask you why the illustrator has used bright colors in that picture. Now, you already know what the question is going to be. I've framed it. Now, when I put the image up, you're not seeing the image and going, oh, what's he going to ask me? I don't know what the question is going to be about. I'm not asking that question. You've already gone, right, I know Arthur is going to ask me about the use of bright colors here. So that is what my thinking needs to be. And then I put the image up and I go, right, Susie, here's an image. I want you to think about why the illustrators use bright colors here. So even if they missed the question the first time, I've given them a second chance to get that. I'm taking away the anxiety around the question because I've highlighted that a question is coming. I've taken away that fear of the unknown. We know from studies that anxiety quite often just comes from a stress of like the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
So if we help diminish that, we're going to alleviate the anxiety of the student. And then the other thing I would do at the start of this chat, we spoke about rushing, how a student often just jumps into a question. So what I want to do is I want to be very clear that there is going to be time after my question for them to consider their answer. And what I do not want them to do is rush in and jump in. So Susie, in a moment, I'm going to put up an image and I want you to consider why the illustrator has used bright colors. Now, when I ask that question, Susie, I'm going to give you a minute to think about your answer before you give me your answer. I'm not going to expect anything from you for that minute. I don't want to hear an answer. I want the silence so you can think about that. Then I put the image up. I ask the question again. I reiterate, I'm now going to give you a minute to think about that. Now, what I've done there, Susie, is I've very clearly said to you, I don't want to rush, but I've also given you a time frame. So I haven't just said, like, I'm going to ask you, and then you're sitting there going, when's he going to ask me? When's he going to ask me?
Yeah.
Just wasting time, essentially, what you're thinking about the question. I've got, I can have a timer on the screen, depending upon the student, how they kind of work. I can say at some point, I'm going to give you a countdown. There's loads of different ways I can do that there. But the key is I'm making it clear to them that I am going to give them thinking time. And then crucially, I have to adhere to that.
Yes.
And the reason I say that is it's really sometimes awkward. If I say, Susie, I'm going to give you a minute to think about it, and then we have a minute of silence, it gets really awkward.
Yeah.
And I have to stick to that. If I've said I'm going to give them a minute, I have to give them a minute. Like if you're working online and you don't want to give a timer to them because that doesn't help with their kind of anxiety, have a timer on yourself. If you're working in person, have that little timer that only you can see. Tap away. Like that's what I would do if I was, when I was teaching, I used to tap really quietly on myself. You got to stick to it.
Yeah.
It would be worse if I say, Susie, I'm going to give you a minute. So Susie, what's the answer?
Yeah.
I'm going to establish that trust.
Of course,
So make it clear that a question is coming and make it clear what your expectation is after you've asked a question.
Yeah.
If you want a quick answer, tell them I want a yes or no answer here.
Yeah.
If you want a long answer, tell them that's what you expect. Take away the unknown. We're building that trust by doing what we say we're going to do.
Yeah.
And there's a great phrase that teaching well is relationship building. Often we think about how we're going to build relationships with our students, and we often do it. And I do this. What are you doing this weekend? What are your hobbies? What are your interests and stuff like that? Now that builds a certain type of relationship. But I also want to show that student that our relationship is I'm here to support and help them. And therefore they need to kind of trust in my kind of how I'm teaching. And part of that is doing as I say. So if I'm going to give them time, I have to give them time. If I say I'm not going to give you a yes or no answer, I'm not going to tell you whether your answer is right or wrong because I want to make it low stakes. I need to be clear that I'm going to do that. If I'm going to give them a minute, I need to give them a minute. And if that involves like the extreme here, Susie, and I've done this when it hasn't worked with a student, it's constantly butting in, constantly rushing online. I've said, I'm going to mute you for a minute. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to put you on mute.
Yeah.
You cannot give me the answer until we unmute and we come back to question. I wouldn't do that every time, and it's something I would consider before I do.
Yeah.
I need to really put the emphasis that I want you thinking about your answer to me because I want your best answer. I don't want your first answer.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, so true. And it's like having the confidence as a tutor to do that and know that you're doing it all to help them, and it's so important, isn't it? Yeah, you got to stay with your conviction in a sense. So this brings me to my final question, Arthur, and you've shared so much already. I just want to squeeze a bit more out of you. So if a tutor could only implement maybe 2 or 3 questioning strategies tomorrow to help, the shy or the anxious student, what would you recommend? What would you say? Well, you've got to do these things straight off the bat.
So I would recommend using the phrase, what was good about, as much as possible to start with. Get that in, get that positivity in the discussion based. That's really crucial. I would also use agree or disagree, or some form of that. To what extent do you agree? What extent disagree? Probably the age of the child and their kind of use of kind of tier 2 language. So I would use agree or disagree, especially at the start of the lesson.
Yeah.
So if I'm trying to do a letter on the Battle of Hastings and I want to know how to pitch it, agree or disagree is a really nice way for me to kind of gauge where that student is at. Works really well in kind of English, like if I'm doing stuff on literature or kind of poetry. What do you think about this? It gives me a really nice way. The other strategy I would use is if a student is still anxious about this, I would give them structured answers, i.e. some sentence starters to them. Like I say, I'm going to give you a question and I'm going to put that sentence starter, whether it's on the screen, whether it's on the table on your face, and it will be different for your subject.
Yeah.
And it might be as simple as the bit my bit I agree with your process is. It just gives a student a bit of a starter.
Yeah.
So they're still struggling to engage with your question despite the other stuff you're doing. Consider giving them some sentence starters and engage with the discussion. Because once they engage with discussion, you can build upon that. And then my other questioning strategy, I'm pushing the word strategy here, is we spoke about silence. We've spoke about having that awkward bit where there is silence because the student is thinking. Now, this comes to you as a tutor. You've got to shift that mindset and you've got to see silence as a great thing in your sessions because silence is where thinking happens and thinking is where the learning is happening. So you've got to learn to embrace that silence. And if you embrace it as a tool for teaching and learning, then it becomes less awkward. Only awkward if the silence is unintentional. When we think about silences being awkward, it's unintentional silences are awkward. Like the silences that we don't find awkward are silences that we are happy to have. And we say this, I was happy just sitting in silence with that person, with my partner, with this stranger. Like, that's okay. So make silences part of your sessions. And if you're still not feeling it, very clearly explain to your student why you are embracing silence. So I expect you to be silent, Susie, because I really want you to think about it, because you gave a brilliant answer last week when you really thought about it. So I really want you thinking, and I want you to give me your best answer, Susie, not your first answer. So take some time to think about this, and I really look forward to hearing your best answer about this. Slight bit of syntax, I'm bringing positivity into it, I'm explaining why I'm doing it. The student is going to feel less anxious because I'm reducing the unknowns in my question.
Oh my goodness, Arthur, how fantastic. No, thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise and all of your amazing insight. I think so many tutors can go away with all of these strategies to go ahead. It's almost like a little bundle of what they can do to help those students. And like you say, it's fantastic for maths, but it's great just to embed, I would say, in all of your sessions if you can. Yeah, I absolutely love that. I've got my own little mental to-do list now of things that I'm going to implement.
We all get
Yeah.
anxious, Susie. So the worst thing we can say is, how can I stop that student ever feeling anxious?
Yeah.
We all feel anxious every day at some point.
Yeah.
So what we've got to understand is, why is that student feeling anxious? And how can I reduce that leveling anxiety in them at this moment? And then over time, how can we reduce anxiety overall?
Oh, well, thank you so much, Arthur, and thank you to everyone who's listened and watched today.